Thank you, Denise, for the land acknowledgement, and to Hotıì ts'eeda for the invitation to be here. I'm very glad to be here tonight. Unlike Donna May, I do not have time for a keynote address, but rather 10 minutes. Those of you who know me know that's almost an impossible task. And so I've taken the liberty of written notes, and I hope you'll allow me to plow my way through them. I want to begin with a story, because I think it tells us something important about where we were and where we are today and how far we've already come. 37 years ago, in my own very recent lifetime, I was a young mother living in a log house with no running water, just below the Arctic Circle. It was a fly-in community. There was no reliable telephone service. It was before ice roads, computers, television, and yes, before Nunavut. The territorial government was still led by unelected officials appointed by Ottawa. Residential schools were still operating in several locations in the north, and all the related traumas were unspoken, undiagnosed, and untreated. Self-medication through hard drinking and addictions was rampant throughout the community and throughout my new family. One day, home alone with my baby daughter, my infant, someone dropped in, extremely drunk. I was completely unprepared for what followed. It was a physical tug of war with my new baby. How to describe my conflicted feelings as new relative and as new mother? And in the end, my heart spoke, telling me to hold on to and protect my child, this little life that had been entrusted to me as mother. The person eventually got up and left us alone. And in recent years, I've reflected often on that story, how all of it, the physical, political, social, and personal challenges, how all of that has positioned the North for what I think it is in many ways becoming, which is a model of resurgence. I say that in respect of the title for Research, Resurgence and Indigenous Health. And at the same time, how it also helped prepare me personally for my role in what I hope will be understood and remembered over history as a model of research, the biggest oral history project ever undertaken in Canada. And of course, I am talking about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and my own role in it as commissioner. Not to dwell on the negative, but for us to be brutally honest with ourselves about the realities. I killed my daughter with suicide. This was a devastating confession, and it was uttered by a sobbing mother, just one of 7,000 others who also broke through their pain to speak to the TRC. The stories of their childhoods in forced schooling revealed previously hidden parts of our own national history. Canada's historic assumptions about presumed racial and spiritual superiority, its policy determination to claim Indigenous lands and silence Indigenous voices, and its strategic plan for residential schools to rupture the transfer of Indigenous languages, cultural knowledge, and even family ties. Our research and the survivors' own statements make clear that residential schools where children were learning their habits for life were often not healthy places. Too many kids, not enough space, not enough food, not enough education, not enough supervision, and certainly not enough love. There were infirmaries in most of the residential schools, and many of them were not safe places. There were also segregated Indian hospitals, where many school students were sent much farther away, unaccompanied, for extended periods. Personal safety was no guarantee there either. We also learned about forced sterilizations and starvation experiments conducted on children. We learned about the schools with no playgrounds, but many with attached graveyards, some with unmarked mass graves. Several were surrounded with barbed wire, and one had an electric chair. Today, individuals, families, and communities, as we've already heard, are living in disproportionate hardship as a result and dying in disproportionate numbers because of those devastating effects that the schools had on the health and well-being. And thank you for the setup, as I've said in my own notes here, like invasive bad germs transferred across generations. That legacy belongs to Canada as a whole, and addressing that gap belongs to all of us. Well, luckily, there have been pockets of deep Indigenous resilience and resurgence throughout the country. In this gathering, just one such example. The very fact that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission ever existed at all is another extremely bold example. The governments didn't want one after all, and neither did many of the churches who ran the schools. But the survivors of the schools won their court case, and one of their conditions, hard fought, was for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission so that their voices could be reclaimed. Resurgence, resilience. And the mandate they gave us as commissioners makes clear what they were trying to achieve. It was all about healing. It says there's an abiding desire to put the events of the past behind us so that we can work towards a stronger and healthier future. A sincere indication and acknowledgement of injustices and harms experienced by Aboriginal people, and the need for continued healing. The truth of our common experiences will help set our spirits free and pave the way to reconciliation and healing. So that issue of healing was taken so seriously that it required culturally appropriate health supports for our work. And what does that mean? It meant this: Indigenous healers and traditional knowledge keepers were integrated to work with Western-trained counselors, therapists, and doctors in dynamic teams. It was an important precedent and a model, I think, worth further study and evaluation, but possibly also for continuation. Was it just a project, or do we need to be continuing based on the positive lessons we learned? We also responded by trying to be ever mindful of the healing potential of how we did our work, the potential for respect as healing by the formal grand entries to our national events in highly visible ways that respected protocols and traditional homelands, the power of culture as healing through the nightly celebrations of song and dance and artistic exhibits, the wealth of language as healing. I remember so clearly the singing of Happy Birthday in as many Indigenous languages as we could muster to honor the thousands of survivors' birthdays never acknowledged or celebrated in their childhoods. We heard so much about such deprivation and longing and countless stories of physical hunger. But what happens when such breadth of healthy nourishment is withheld from a child, and not just food? How the mind is damaged when children are taught lies about themselves and each other. I hated white people. I hated being Indian. I hated my parents. I hated their brown faces. How the body is damaged when children are starved, sometimes in the face of adults who keep the best quality and quantity of food for themselves, and when physical punishment is extreme and frequent. I learned to steal at residential school. We were so hungry, we learned to steal food. How the heart is damaged when loved ones are denied access and intimate contact is used for sexual predation, humiliation, and shaming. I didn't know how to hug. I was afraid I was one of them. How the spirit is damaged when deprived of all sense of belonging, and when age-old relationship with Creator and creation is denied or ridiculed. I was just a little girl. My family did traditional ceremonies. The nuns put this bracelet on me and made me wear it. It said pagan, and all the kids laughed at me. I used to eat all those communion wafers, trying to get that paganness out of me. So from a research point of view, the TRC did not reveal what was wrong with Indigenous people. It revealed what was wrong with our country, and it revealed what happened to Indigenous people. I think that's a very good starting point for follow-up research. To honor the parent left behind, one of the images we often use throughout the TRC was of a nursing mother and baby, the maternal bond that goes so far beyond just feeding, how the holding and transfer of nutrients ensure physical support and stamina, the strengthening and protection of the body, how the words spoken and songs sung develop early language skills, the enrichment of the mind, how the intimacy of the connection nourishes the love bond, the fulfillment of the heart, and how the regular repetition of the sounds, smells, and touch provide familiarity, a sense of relationship, attachment, and belonging, the strengthening of the spirit. Don't we all need such lifelong nourishment, a sense of being fed all that is good for us, all that is caring and life-sustaining, mind, body, heart, and spirit? This wisdom of holistic health and wellness is ancient Indigenous knowledge, knowledge that is being reactivated today in hopeful examples throughout the land and in hope-filled voices we heard throughout the TRC. I want my identity back. Is that too much to ask? I believe in elders. I found my identity through my culture. This is my belief. I found me. Today, I am allowing myself to feel. Today, I love me. Now I have to make things right with people so my children can learn and so they can tell their children they care. A young Enoch talked about the role of culture in healing and reconciliation, and he said both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal cultures alike must respect one another in light of their historical experiences. They have to see eye to eye on healing, understanding, and trust built, but it might possibly involve a humongous shift in attitudes. And another talks about resilience. Hopefully, if we truly believe the pain of the residential school legacy has had an intergenerational impact, then it necessarily follows that there will be intergenerational survivors too. In the name of our best friend, resilience, we can look forward to intergenerational resilience, looking forward to the future, working together to keep important healing work going. This week I came across a meditation mantra in the ancient Sanskrit language, for of course not all indigeneity originates in North America. And it was Tvam Eva Mata. It means the universe is our mother, the bedrock of that ancient traditional teaching of natural law. It reminded me of so many Dene elders over the years who have said that if you take care of the earth will take care of you. That our way of being in the world and with each other, if it is a caring, respectful relationship, nurtures a response of unconditional love and support and sustenance, like the bond between mother and child. Others have said that when times get tough, they go to the land for healing. And I remember one elder in particular, perhaps some of you may also, Stanley Isia, telling me in the context of a papal visit by Pope John Paul II. Stanley said, "The Bible is written on the land." So the questions that you are grappling with about health and research questioning, resurgence and indigenous health, these are extremely complex questions without simple or singular answers. But thinking back to the scene I described for you 40 years ago, and now knowing that for the past 25 years we've had elected indigenous leadership in our public government, that indigenous leaders working together, Dene and Inuit, created Nunavut, not Ottawa. That this territory was the first place in the country to introduce mandatory education for all students around the history of residential schools, treaties, and the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and so much more work that is now happening, spinning off of that. And of course, this growing network of academics and health professionals who are doing all they can to advance the big work that was described by the courageous survivors through the residential school project. So I want to leave you with a final thought as encouragement from an old book called Leadership is an Art. We do not grow by knowing all of the answers, but rather by living with the questions, searching for knowledge and wisdom, and of course, justice, health, and healing. Masicho, merci beaucoup, kwa nami matna.